Welcome back to another episode of the Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday episodes here on YouTube. Today, I'm your host, Aman, and I'm going to talk about football in general because obviously we had the college football playoff rankings. I know it's very controversial, so I'm going to talk about that and then the big Eagles Niners game that happened, give my thoughts on that because, like I said, we're going to talk about it a lot. We are trying to figure out the whole Spotify and Apple situation. We are going to start posting on that more, so be on the lookout for that. We're still covering all sports topics daily through the shorts in these episodes. For the time being, tune into YouTube, TikTok, and of course, Spotify and Apple once we start posting. But with that, let's get right into the episode. How is Florida State not in? I get both sides of the stories, to be honest, because, how is it Jordan Travis's fault that he broke his leg? FSU, undefeated team, and, this is where the SEC bias shows up, because FSU beats their two non-conference teams. Overall, I believe 13-0, which is absolutely insane, first of all. Second of all, with that record, how are you not in the championship? 13-0 in the ACC. Yeah, in the ACC. And you're still not in it? Like, that just makes no sense. Just because Jordan Travis is not... A quarterback is not the full offense of a team. That goes for NFL, too. Like, many people would have argued that Anthony Richardson was the Colts' entire offense. He went down. The Colts are still a really good team. And so FSU, they deserve to at least have a shot. Because, like Jordan Travis said, it's so unfortunate when you hear these things being said when Jordan Travis is like, I wish my leg broke earlier so they could still see how the offense works without him. Because obviously, he might be a big part of the offense, but he isn't the entire story. It's just showing that it's such a flawed system and that the extended playoff is coming a year too later. Because everyone knows it should have been this year. Oregon barely lost to Washington. They somewhat deserve to be in. Washington definitely deserves to be in. Texas, I feel like, deserves to be in. But FSU, I get putting in Alabama, but they only beat Georgia by 3 points. Georgia still deserves to be in. The extended playoffs definitely should have been this year because Georgia only loses to a really good Alabama team by 3. They were the number 1 ranked in the country for a while, and all of a sudden they're missing out on the playoffs entirely. So I somewhat don't get it. Their parameters while ranking, it changes on a week to week basis. If anything, this just showed how inconsistent their system is. And it's unfortunate that Florida State has to be punished the most for this because it doesn't make sense. But the other side, you had Alabama versus Michigan. In some people's eyes, that would be a more entertaining and fair matchup just based on paper. Obviously, one team could destroy the other when they actually play. But just on paper, thinking about it, I guess Alabama would have been or is a more entertaining and more even and more fair matchup. So one team is not lopsided than the other. So maybe they were thinking about that. That's the only other side I can understand. But I definitely had FSU going in and leaving Alabama out. Because, again, it was only a 3-point win over a great Georgia team. FSU has an undefeated season. They literally listened to all the parameters, followed everything, and they still don't make it. There's definitely a double standard and very inconsistent ranking system going on here. And they just exposed it. But without further ado, let's get into football, NFL, specifically the 49ers versus Eagles. I may inadvertently touch on some other games, but this was the matchup everyone was looking forward to. Many thought it should have been primetime game. I thought it should have been a primetime game over the Chiefs and Packers, but we'll get into the Chiefs Packers later too, because that was a game which nobody expected the Packers to win. But as for the Niners Eagles, Debo Samuel been trash talking those Eagles for a while. Hassan Reddick started off earlier in the week saying there's a lot of boo-hoos and everything like that. The Niners went into Philly's house and destroyed the Eagles. And it could have gone out of hand once the Eagles scored their first touchdown, but the Niners defense showing resolve. Brock Purdy, MVP candidate. And think it McCaffrey should be an MVP candidate. I keep talking about how the MVP shouldn't be a quarterback award. They should limit the amount of quarterbacks that are in the MVP conversation. Because if we're realistically talking, take Tyreek Hill off the Dolphins, and the Dolphins aren't the Dolphins. Tua's still a great quarterback, but I'm sorry, the Dolphins aren't the Dolphins without Tyreek Hill. And, I mean, the Niners, they just showed the world who the best team in the league is. Fine, they might have a record one game worse than the Eagles. And fine, Jalen Hurts may have missed some time, but that had no effect on the game whatsoever. And now you get the Niners Eagles matchup, Brock Purdy actually playing, Debo Samuel scoring a hat trick, 3 touchdowns. AJ Brown, Devonta Smith still played decently, but man, they just exposed that defense a lot. And now Darius Leonard, Shaq Leonard, I think, whatever. We'll call him Darius Leonard. Released by the Colts, still a great linebacker. Signing with the Cowboys or Eagles, he could have helped potentially against the Niners, but no one's stopping that. It's going to be like the McCaffrey trade deadline where they go undefeated once McCaffrey starts. And so now you got Chase Young on that defense, man. Niners are such an unstoppable team. The whole league better look out. I wouldn't be surprised if they end the season 14-3 with the bye. Because, I mean, the Eagles still got to figure out. The Eagles are lucky right now that they don't have the same record as the Niners, because maybe some flags allowed them to win the game against the Bills. So now you got that meltdown, and I mean, you got the meltdown by the Buffalo Bills, and now that carried over into this game, but this time the Niners just absolutely obliterated them. As for the Chiefs-Packers game, the Chiefs, that high octane offense we're so used to seeing, it's just not there anymore. And yes, there was a controversial ending, missed pass interference call, but many people thought it made up for the flag on Mahomes where it was supposedly called a late hit even though Mahomes was inbound. So it goes both ways. The Chiefs still suffered because of the Pacheco unsportsmanlike penalty and unnecessary fighting, and Pacheco got thrown out of the game. But I feel like the refs should not decide the game. And yes, that Mahomes late hit was not really a late hit, and the missed PI may have been a makeup call for that. It's just unfair. I still think you called the flag because you want some type of fairness in the game. It wouldn't have been a controversial call. The deep pass one at the very end of the game, like a late play, that's just some sort of like just throwing it up there. I get why a flag is not called in that scenario, but Marquez Valdes-Scantling was clearly trying to catch the ball, and the Packers dude just jumped on him. Like, that's the most obvious pass interference call that I've seen since the Saints-Rams championship game. Because, I mean, we all know that should have been a PI call. Then they allow coaches to challenge PI calls, and then they don't allow coaches to challenge PI calls. I don't know why PI calls are non-challengeable, and it's frustrating when you're getting an amazing game and the refs just decided. Even though the Chiefs would have gotten bailed out if that pass interference was called, you still want to see some sort of consistency and honesty between the referees But shocking loss, Rashee Rice, the most targeted on the team once again for the second week in a row, next to Travis Kelce and Patrick Mahomes. That could be a deadly trio for years to come, but the Chiefs still have to figure out because they aren't putting up as many points as we're accustomed to seeing. And they just got to figure it out because right now the AFC is really looking deadly, and I'm not sure the Chiefs are going to make it to the Super Bowl this year. I think you've got to put the Ravens, potentially the Jaguars. Jaguars are playing amazing football, so we'll see what happens in the AFC. It's going to be intriguing because now the Chiefs aren't that very overpowered team that we expect them to be honest. That's my take on everything. Tune in tomorrow for another 10-minute episode here on YouTube or on the Shorts, TikTok, YouTube. Doesn't matter. Tune in. Have a great week.